All right, everybody. Welcome back to The Last of Us recap and review on the Purple Podcast. This is episode 3 now. This episode being named Long Time after the 1970 Linda Ronstadt song of that same name, which plays throughout this episode in a variety of ways, as well as just the general themes of the song go hand in hand with this episode as well. This is a love tale. I thought it was an amazing episode. We knew, or we heard at least from last episode, episode 3 was supposed to be really good. I think it absolutely lived up to that expectation. That song, Long Time, funny stat about that at this point. And this tweet was probably from yesterday. So I can't even imagine what it is now. Well, I guess it's through a timeline. But on Sunday, January 29th, between 11 p.m. and midnight Eastern Time, there was a more than 4,900% increase in U.S. streams of Long Time by Linda Ronstadt. So it was an iconic part of this episode. It set this kind of mood and told this story and followed this relationship throughout it. People are saying this is like the Kate Bush Stranger Thing vibe. So Running Up That Hill, this song is having that same kind of vibe as that to some degree. Just how it's bringing back this song that is just completely irrelevant. I basically at this point, I have heard this song before. I am familiar with it. I actually saw it or recall it from a movie with Timothée Chalamet named Hot Summer Nights. Pretty fun movie if you want to go check that one out. So I did recognize the song. Honestly, when they were first singing it, I didn't, because it's, just them singing it. But we'll get to that and everything later on down in the episode here. This was a very different episode in terms of what the video game, or what happened in the video game and the TV show. Very different, which is, I think it's a good thing, truthfully, for the overall, lifetime of this show. Anyways, going on to like episode or The Last of Us 2. Apparently, that one is not the best story. People have a lot of basically grievances with that video game. So it's good to see that the show is willing to do things that are different. They explain it in actually like the little recap bit as well. They went with the mindset of saying, if we can make it better, let's make it better. If we can't, we can't. I actually tweeted about it, so shout out the Purple Media Co. Twitter account. We are going to start rolling on that as well, so make sure to go give it a follow. But we tweeted, one of the most difficult decisions when adapting to any when adapting any form of original content to television or big screen is when and when not to stray from the original content. The Last of Us episode 3 is an excellent example of when to. A far more compelling and devastating story by all means. I thought this was much better. I think I enjoy this a lot more than what happens in the video game. Even though it is incredibly sad and devastating, as I had said, it's still very hopeful, and altogether I think it's a really beautiful story. So without further ado, let's hop into the episode. We actually don't start with a cold start this time this week. We don't have a flashback showing how everything began. We actually start with Joel and Ellie basically on their way to Bill's house, just following the events of last episode when Tess just ate that fungus in her mouth and blew him up, bought him some time. So we begin in the woods here. Not a cold start. We were wrong about last episode, but we'll touch a little bit more about our flashback scenes in a second. So the start is not a flashback. We're with Joel and Ellie in the woods, and this whole scene kind of goes on where they're traveling through the woods. They're stopping and getting supplies at this old convenience store that Joel had, I guess, stashed some things. Weird scene in that one where Ellie just kind of goes up to that zombie or the infected, the stalker, and cutting its head open. Just kind of weird. Don't know what it tells you. It's more so just showing you that she's maybe not as innocent as she seems. Well, she's already stabbed someone in the knee, but it's at least where she's not overly fearful of them. and just kind of giving you a hint at her past as well there, setting up that character, showing you why, or showing you who she is, and kind of hinting at what might have happened to her to make her like that. But overall, Joel is still playing this I'm not an emotional guy thing. Of course, he is emotional about Tess, and overall, I would say that's probably been my biggest gripe with the show so far, is just that I don't necessarily feel that emotion from the relationship. We haven't seen much of it. I am more hopeful that we will see some of that from this episode. But I think there's still a ways for me to go. I'm not feeling that aspect yet of Joel's sadness. I get it. He wants to suppress it. It was very sad losing his daughter. And I'm not getting it from Tess's and him's relationship yet there. But they can continue traveling. Joel is playing that. But Ellie, on the other hand, is more so trying to ask questions, trying to handle these aspects. But Joel's still in a survival mode. Only, even though he is beginning to show some signs here, some fatherly instincts. There's a scene in the woods. He lets her use his jacket. As they're walking through this kind of countryside scene, he's telling her about the world. We see that plane on the hill. Pretty cool visual from the episode talking about that. But Ellie, obviously she hasn't seen all these things, so she's talking about it in this wonderment. Joel's being able to be this fatherly figure and telling her about it, showing her things for the first times. And then also we get to where they're about to approach that boneyard. Joel says he doesn't want her to see this. We're going to go this way. And Ellie says, why don't you want me to see it? Or something. So she walks upon it. We see all these bones, little baby's rainbow blanket. And Joel explains that the military, when everything was first breaking down, didn't really ask questions. It was safer just to shoot and ask questions later than to basically, they probably knew they weren't sick, but did they care? They're going to have to take care of them. Potentially someone is. It's just not worth it. They killed him out. So Fedra just showing the general brutality of them taking over the world. So we end up going into that flashback scene, and this is where we're first introduced to Bill, right when everything's breaking out, essentially. The military has came in. They are rounding up everyone in their neighborhood, and we see this lady who, she has her baby, and that blanket's on there. So, damn, tough scene there. It tells you exactly what happened and paints a really good picture. It's very effective in how that scene works, how it transfers time like that. But then it goes off and kind of shows us a bit of Bill. And, after that, where you kind of get past the morbid aspect of, oh, these people all died, you get to meet Bill, you get to see a bunch of him. And this is a character we've been very much looking forward to this whole entire season, just because he's iconic from the video game, crazy guy. I like this Bill more, honestly, in his story now. Everything comes out. There's a part of me that wanted to see more of the Bill from the video game, but at the same time, I think this scene is incredibly well done. So Nick Offerman, who plays Bill, we first meet him here, and I think this whole montage scene is pretty awesome for him, where this is the Bill we know. He's very paranoid. He goes out, he's scavenging, getting supplies, gets the gas turned back on. So he's living well. He has this whole area. He wasn't very trustworthy of the military, doesn't go with them. And now he's essentially just living in this haven and setting himself up for a long, long life, living here on his own. Until 4 years later, someone happens upon a trap he has put in the ground. We meet Frank. Frank we know from the video game as well. Very different outcome there. Still going to hint at that. We're not there yet in the story. But Murray Bartlett is who plays him. Want to give the actor their credits due there. I think this scene was very funny. This takes place in 2007 at this point. So the initial breakout was in 2003. 4 years later, he meets Frank in the trap, 2007. And you can tell that Bill is just not ready to open up to people, but he still has a degree of kindness in him, which is weird. So you get this kind of chemistry kind of deal here. What typically this character would not be someone who's going to open up his home to anyone, but he does. He takes this guy in with kindness, and it turns out to be the best decision that he ever made. And this is one aspect of, or a big theme just throughout this show, throughout this episode, is it's a bleak world out there. There's not much going on. There's not a lot of things to be hopeful about. There's not a lot of things to live for. So, being faced with a person, I guess he decided to take that leap and open himself out, because what else was he going to do? You're not living if you don't put yourself in a position, to live. He's just surviving. So he does. He lets this stranger in. We get this beautiful little scene where there is some chemistry. I thought a very funny line from this was that Arby's line. I'm not going to go through the whole rendition, but it sets up the chemistry between these two, and I think both these actors do really well. I believe their characters from the get-go, and it's something that I'll refer back to Tess and Joel. I just don't get. These guys work so well. The chemistry between them, it makes me, as the story goes on, we have that. But their whole little quirky vibe where they have the Arby's joke, they're different people. We know this from the get-go, but they bounce off each other very well, and they just have very good chemistry together. So basically Frank ends up says, well, Arby's didn't have free lunch. It was a restaurant. Very funny. Anyways, Bill lets Frank into the house, lets him take a shower, sets out some clothes for him. You can feel this reservedness from Bill where he's definitely not opened up or loose yet. He's still really reserved to this idea, but he's going with it, and he's nervously taking a step forward each time, but he's still allowing it to happen. At no point is he pulling the plug. He's keeping himself open to this idea. We have the dinner scene. We have this line where Bill pours the wine, and Frank basically makes this statement saying a man knows to, I guess, pair this wine with what? And he's like, I know I don't seem like the type, is what Bill says back, but Frank says, yes, you do. The piano scene where we first hear the Linda Ronstadt song says, this is more like you in terms of playing the piano. So you can tell that Frank sees Bill in a certain way that maybe typical friends are not going to see each other. They have some kind of understanding. And like I was saying, there's this natural chemistry that you feel throughout just every scene that they're together. And eventually, Frank makes his move on Bill. Bill doesn't fight back. He says, he asks him about who's the girl, and Bill says there is no girl, and Frank says, I know. So you get that he understands. They kiss, they consummate the love, and obviously Bill hasn't been in this situation before. He's never been open to it. So, you get that little shyness and just general reservedness where he's tiptoeing through every situation, but he's, letting it occur, of course. Flash forward to 3 years later, we see that Frank and Bill are still together. Frank's going a little crazy here, and this is a good aspect, and this is what makes you grow to love this relationship so much, is that it is a very real depiction of love. And I think this episode did it very well because they don't see eye to eye. They're polar opposites in terms of their characters. This point in the show, I think Frank's getting driven a little crazy by Bill, and that's part of love. There's things that the people you love drive you crazy about. So very cool. I liked that. They meet Tess and Joel is basically what I'm getting at. Frank is inviting people in. He's trying to be more open. Frank wants to have friends. He wants to live. He's getting, I guess, kind of tired of just being reserved and super paranoid and living in this Bill's world. So he wants to open it up. Tess and Joel are there. There's kind of a similarity between the two, which towards the end of the episode, it kind of hints that this is what Frank wanted, or Bill wanted Joel to do. But Joel and Tess are very similar in that Tess is more aligned with Frank. Joel is very much like Bill, very paranoid, very shut off to everything. But this is just kind of a cool little scene. We get to see Tess again. This is where I'm optimistic about learning more or getting closer with Tess and Joel's relationship, because this even gave an aspect of it. It's like, oh, wow, this is a moment in time a bit ago where Tess and Joel are together in time. I think that's what works really well for this relationship we see in this episode is time. So the more you see them together, the further amount you go back. Because if you think about it, apparently Joel's been with Tess for 16 years. That gives you even more of an attachment at that point. I just don't think right now we've seen a lot of that or a lot of backstory in theirs. But with these backstories, I would imagine or I would hope that we're going to see a little bit more from Tess and Joel so it can build up that relationship for me. And maybe upon second viewing, I can go in with the understanding of what they become. Right now, I'm just imagining what they were at that point. We also hear about the radio code, so that 80 songs is dangerous deal. Also, we have a forewarning from Joel. He mentions, I guess, getting a fence for Bill or getting material for him, so that kind of wins him over to some degree. But he warns him about Raiders, said there will come at some point. Here we go, 3 years later, we have that very, I guess, cute, you can call it, strawberry scene where Bill Offerman's laugh is just hilarious, where he giggles like a little girl in this strawberry field that Frank has surprised him with. A kind of morbid forewarning here as well, because they start the scene off like kind of running in this era where Bill says, sorry for growing older faster than you, because he is older and he just is getting older quicker than him. But then we do see the Raiders. They come out. Bill gets shot. He's fighting. He's defending Frank. Frank's helping him, but he's bleeding out. These Raiders are just absolute NPCs too. They were running straight into the flamethrowers just over and over again. They were terrible, basically. Bill is out in the middle of the road. They can't hit a shot. So that's just a side note, something that was kind of a little odd. Also, flashback here, or not flashback, but touching on something earlier in the episode. When they say they're 10 miles outside of Boston when they're right originally in that forest in the mountains, there's no way in hell they're 10 miles out of Boston. All right, back to the present time. But he's bleeding out. He's telling Frank what to do. He's telling where the keys are. He's telling him to contact Joel. But we end up flashing ahead. And it turns out that Bill has survived. Frank was able to save him. But we are 10 years into the future at this point. So the biggest jump so far, the last timeline we were at was 2013. We are now in 2023. So basically aligning up with present day here. And we see the men have both grown old together. I think this is why it's worked so well. You know, I mentioned time earlier, but we see this time of them growing together, their relationship, and them just at the end of the day always being there for each other, knowing they're different, and just finding a love in this post-apocalyptic world where it could have, there could be no hope at all. But we see they've both grown old, and it actually turns out Frank is the one who is failing in health at this point. So earlier when Bill had said sorry for growing older faster than you, it's just this kind of sad turn now where Frank is actually the one, his body's failing him. I think he has some neurological disease. He looks really sickly. He's in a wheelchair. His health is completely deteriorated to the point where he cannot do basic tasks throughout the day. And we end up coming to a point. It's in the morning. They've just woken. Apparently, Frank has been up all night. He says to Bill, I've been all up night. I don't want to go to sleep because this is going to be my last day. I've decided that at the end of the day, I'm going to crush up all these pills and wine, and I'm going to kill myself, basically, just because he can't take the pain anymore. He can't do anything. He's just tired of living that way. Obviously, at this point, Bill is devastated and very sad, but a very powerful scene here where Frank says to Bill, basically, we've had a lot of bad days together, but I've had more good days with you than anyone else. So let's make this last day a good day. So he's going to have one last very good day together. And that's just, oh God, the feeling that you have in your chest just throughout this whole last day in this montage it's giving you. You've grown old with these people. You've watched a whole episode of these guys growing old together. And you just feel their love for each other and their companionship and just what this is meant for each of their lives. They were in such a terrible world. As I said, it's easy to be bleak and not open yourself to love, but that's the whole point, in that, you have to be open for these things to live a fruitful life. And it kind of foreshadows what Joel is going to have to do at this point as well with Ellie there. But he says, one last good day. Important locations. It shows you this scene and gets you all nostalgic, so you feel these years. You see paintings around the house that Frank has done. You see the trap where Bill found Frank. You see that surprise garden. By the end of the night, they end up showing them getting married. They choose to get married. They have dinner together. Bill makes him the same meal when they first met. They have the same wine when they first met. And then we see this very deliberate scene. And you're just, this whole time, you're just hurting. You're like, oh God, the day's up. It's happening. You feel Bill's emotion. You're like, oh my God, this is just terrible. You feel absolutely horrendous for him. And he's crushing up these pills, pours it into the wine. Frank takes it all back, and then Bill does the same, drinks his wine, and Frank gets into a point where he's asking, he's like, you think it'll be enough? And Bill says, more, or what does he say? Enough to kill a horse, that line, which then Frank asks him, did you already have it in the bottle? We discover that Bill has already dosed the wine. He's going to kill himself as well in this Romeo and Juliet kind of fashion to some degree. He gives this great aspect of, or this great line where he's saying, I'm fulfilled, I'm happy, I'm old. It's not a tragedy that I'm killing myself. I'm fulfilled. You were my purpose, and now my purpose is done. It's not worth living anymore without, a purpose. So we'll go together. And it's just a very powerful scene that when you look at the differences between their relationships, or their relationship with this in the game, I just think this story is just far more impactful and just great. And the overall purpose of the episode and video game get fulfilled in just basically like the transactional purpose. But the last scene we see of them is Bill walking Frank down their hallway. The camera's starting to fade out. They're walking to die together for the last time. Take me to bed is what Frank says. And they walk down the hallway, and I think it's just an incredible scene overall. That whole last day, the emotional aspect, you're just gut-wrenched throughout the whole entire thing because it's so impactful because you believe in these characters' love so much. Like, you are fully invested in their love story. It's a very true, gritty, it's not a fairy tale. Like I said, there's good days and bad days. That's what Frank mentions to him. But overall, they had mostly good days together. They're very different. They had differences. It's a real love story. You believe this for them. And that just whole nostalgia montage, that whole final day where it culminates in this just devastating way that both of them are killing themselves. And I like that better than, if Frank didn't. So that gives you that kind of, I don't know, that romantic joy. And that's something that I guess Frank mentioned, it was romantic as well in that scene. But it makes me a lot happier knowing that they go together in this, notebookish fashion here. But that ends that scene. Joel and Ellie arrive to find the letter. Ellie begins reading it. and says, I guess there's a letter that's also in the video game, and I'll go into that in a second. But this letter basically is Frank or Bill detailing what they've done. They've killed themselves. He thought it was going to be Joel. He didn't. I guess he just didn't necessarily know that it was going to be Joel, but told it to him. Mentions Tess. Also talks about how he was kind of a friend to him, and it's just overall a hopeful message in this letter, detailing how it's worth opening up to love. Maybe this wine will help you and Tess discover what you are. So that's kind of the sting of it. And that doesn't sting me as much because I don't know that Tess and Joel relationship very well yet. It hasn't won me as this one did with, they proved it. They didn't just say it. They didn't just say, oh, Joel hides his emotions. That's why, he did love her, but that's why it doesn't look like it. This one shows me, at least. It doesn't just say it. But this one's a hopeful message, and it kind of is cracking that door open a little further to letting hope and love back in, and ultimately will happen between him and Ellie and Joel. So that's going to be the similar character arc that Bill had, in that he opened himself up to someone, to Frank, and it gave his whole life. It gave him his life's purpose. He could have died without any kind of, I guess, less lasting impact from his life, or he just wouldn't have had the life that he had. It was his purpose. It was his goal in life. I guess it necessarily wasn't his goal, but it became his purpose. It became his reason for living. So he had to open himself up to it first, and he's trying to, I guess, at least let Joel know that he really should open himself to the potential or possibility of love again. In the video game, however, I don't know. I guess it's good to see backstory, because you don't see any of that in the video game at all. You get hinted at Bill and Frank's relationship, but Frank is already gone. Frank is already dead. He has ran away. He was actually bitter towards Bill. He couldn't live paranoid anymore. So if we say that 2010 mark, so 3 years after they met each other, that's probably where Frank is running away in this timeline, where he's fed up. He can't live that way anymore, and ends up getting bit and ends up killing himself. But we find the letter, and it's from Frank to Bill, saying very mean things to him, essentially saying that I couldn't live with you anymore. That's why I ran away. There's also some cool video game aspects that don't get covered because this episode is showed the way it was. There's like a really cool scene where you're in a high school that I loved. Kind of going through, you get to see a bloater there as well. But like I said, the overall transactional aspect of this episode, where Joel needs to get a car battery, does occur in the end. But while we're there, we also get an idea of this Wyoming plan. So they're going out west. Ellie finds Bill's handgun. So I'm sure we're going to see that at some point. As they're leaving, Joel puts the seatbelt on Ellie, so just another way that he's showing his fatherly instincts, that he's becoming unto Ellie a bit, and liking, the idea of that he's, this is someone he needs to protect now. This is giving him purpose, again, in the same aspect and way that Frank gave Bill purpose. But the last thing we see here, and hear her here as well, weird note, Ellie finds a cassette player, knows what it is, and knows how to operate it in a car, but doesn't know what the fuck a seatbelt is. Just thought about that thing. But she does. She puts it in, and guess what song it is? Long, Long Time. They're driving away. We flash to that window scene, which Bill has stated they left the window open so it wouldn't smell. And it kind of backs in. We hear their song. It doesn't show their bodies, which I think is a very purposeful thing. And just leaving it there, kind of eerie feeling, and you're just absolutely broken by the story. It's incredibly heartbreaking, but wow, what a beautiful, beautiful episode. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Change of pace, change from the video game, and I think they accomplished it very, very well, which makes the rest of this even more exciting, I think, for me. knowing that they're willing to stray this far away from the original content to make it better. And I don't think they're going to bastardize anything. I have full trust and belief in these guys here. So incredibly excited for what's ahead. Like I said, I would like to have seen like Bill fighting with them, but in this, I think the story's just a lot better. But I would have liked to see Bill fighting with them, of course. I would have liked to see that high school scene. But overall, transactionally, they end up with the battery. The story continues on. The plot continues. But let's hop into our categories, guys. We're going to go through our favorite scenes. We're going to go through our favorite characters as well as other themes and things here. So scenes, if I have to pick some favorite ones, undeniably, it is that 2023 setting scene, Frank's last day, Frank and I guess we can call that Bill and Frank's last day together. That scene by far wins my favorite scene of the episode. There's some very good ones, but I think just as a whole, this whole story, even though it was a change of tempo, change of pace, it really, really worked well and gave those two characters a really, really good story that the video game doesn't offer. So I think it's a big improvement, and overall gives the story, message, theme of this whole entire show, video game, a lot of leg, a lot of life. Open yourself to love. Continue on. This is how you find purpose, really. But I'm just gonna go with the number one scene. Definitely has to be that 10 years later scene, that whole kind of day. Favorite characters of the episode, we have Ellie, Joel, and Tess. Tess, you still have some work to do, and maybe we'll get it in backstories. Joel, don't see much of you here. Ellie, don't see much of you here, but I will say at this point that I'm in on Joel and Ellie's relationship. I can see it coming together, and I am liking Ellie a lot more than I had initially, seeing this side of her that's trying to open up, this side of her that's just an innocent kid, not just that, mean, snarky asshole kid at the beginning that she is. Those funny aspects still occur, but when they're not every sentence, you can grow fonder of her, no doubt. But overall, and I'm not going to give it to one or the other because I think that's incredibly unfair. My favorite characters of the episode, who won the episode? Bill and Frank. No doubt, this is a real love story. I thought it was one of the best depictions of a love story that I've seen and just kind of believed in a lot more. And, as a heterosexual male, I absolutely love this. I don't know if it doesn't have anything to do with it. And what sucks is some people can't appreciate that because of this fact that they're not homosexual. But as we see with just kind of the rankings overall, we'll touch at the end, people have been hating on this episode. It's polarizing, I guess, in that degree. And it's a real shame that people can't appreciate this kind of art just because of something like that. Honestly, I think it made it more impactful for me because there's not any kind of sexualization of these characters to me. It's not my bag, baby. That's all it is, as Austin Powers says. But I think it's an incredibly beautiful scene, and if you can't appreciate it, that's just kind of a shame because I thought it was a beautiful episode. The fact that people are sniping it on ratings is just kind of childish, truly, at this point. But it was just a beautiful episode, not a fairy tale, as I've stated, but you believe every bit of this relationship, their chemistry together, the acting together. I wonder if they'll win awards if they're literally not in any other aspect or any other episodes. If Bill Offerman, did I say Bill Offerman? Is it actually Bill Offerman? I'm so terrible. Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett, if they don't win some awards, or if they could win awards, I think they definitely deserve to, even though they're in literally maybe one episode of it. That other actor, he was also in The White Lotus, so very funny there. By coincidence, I think he plays a homosexual actor in that. I don't know if he is in real life or not. I guess it doesn't matter. But anyways, guys, let's continue on to our themes and things. So Bill and Frank win our characters category there. Themes and things. Joel and Ellie, they continue to grow. I'm going to buy into it. I'm excited for it. If anything, this show has shown that it can create very real human emotion. It can depict love. It can make you believe that this is a real relationship and that, you can be so moved and so devastated by an episode. I believe that we're going in a good direction there with the Joel and Ellie relationship as well. Flashback starts. We didn't get a flashback start, but we got a whole flashback episode. So how about them apples? There's a slight wine theme in this episode. So us on the Purple Podcast, we are wine drinkers by nature. So nice to see some wine. Made me want to drink a glass of wine, I'll tell you that. Maybe not one riddled with pills, but I could use a glass of wine, I won't lie. And then the final thing here, love/hope. It's going to continue on throughout the episode. It was shown from the song, the Linda Ronstadt song. It was shown by Bill and Frank throughout it. It's going to be continue shown by Joel and Ellie. Maybe we'll get to see a little bit more of Tess and Joel. We'll see some of Ellie and her past. I'm not going to spoil that for anyone, but love, hope in a world like this that is so horrible, an apocalyptic world where there are fungal zombies eating people and infecting the world. You still, to live, need to open yourself up to love. It's a world that's going to harden you, but at the end of the day, for any kind of, purpose, that's what you need to do. You need to open your heart to others, and I think this episode depicts that beautifully. Highlights of the episode, guys. This is where we take the winner of each category, put them up against each other to find the number one highlight of the entire episode. Love/hope coming in from things/things. Bill/Frank for our characters. And the 10 years later scene in 2023. Guys, this is by and far the toughest decision I've ever had to make in regards to these three. And honestly, I think it would be a shame to have to pick one. I'm going to let you all decide. I'm going to send it out. This is going to be a clip at some point. But Love/hope, Bill/Frank, 10 years later scene. What are we going to pick, guys? I think the only answer is love wins. We're going with love. We're going to follow the theme of love. That's what brought it together. It was beautifully portrayed by Bill and Frank. It was beautifully portrayed in this episode, the 10 years later scene and all the other scenes that put it all together and brought us this original story with some inspiration, of course, from the video game. But I would call this original enough in terms of the content. Beautiful episode. I think it's my favorite, top to bottom, of the year so far here. So let's hop on over to our Rotten Tomatoes, and we're adding IMDb to the ratings as well. So let's hop into them. First episode, this is the Rotten Tomatoes scores. Episode 1 at a 100%. Episode 2 is currently sitting at a 96%. And episode 3, this one today, also a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. IMDb, this is where I say it's a shame, guys. First episode is sitting at a 9.2. Second episode is sitting at a 9.3. And the third episode sitting at an 8.1. And that's just a shame. That's a bunch of baloney. Those are big dummies out there doing that stuff. But 8.1, ridiculously low. I don't think it's even fathomable to argue that it's that worse than any of these other episodes because, truthfully, I believe that it is not only one of the best TV episodes or episodes of this show, but TV episodes that I've seen in a while in terms of just the overall story impact and how involved and much I cared about these two characters. Like, I was absolutely devastated. It seems to be the general consensus. And aside from jackasses going on there and give it a 1 star just because it contains, two gay characters is insanely ridiculous to me. I can appreciate the story. I don't have to be a homosexual to appreciate the story. It's a beautiful love episode. It's a beautiful episode of this show. It's a beautiful just episode in TV in total. I think it's probably, like, if they can, I bet they win awards. I think it's an incredibly great episode. It sent the Twitter sphere and all social media into a rampant about just how devastating the scene truly was. And I think it was a beautiful adaptation of an original content that was a lot different than that original content is. And I think it did it for the better. So I like that they took the risk. I like that it worked so well, obviously. But that'll do it, guys. That was episode 3, titled Long, Long Time. I could play it on the outro, but I think I would get copyright infringement. Maybe I can, maybe I can't. But anyways, guys, stay safe. Hey, open your heart to love. Love others. No matter how bad it might be out there, guys, you got to be able to love to keep life worth living. Sorry for the stumbling. I do it every once in a while. It's hard to talk on the mic this long straight, but I truly enjoy doing it. I absolutely love doing this. I absolutely love you guys at home. Thank you for listening. I truly appreciate it always. Purple Podcast, episode number 38 in total. The Last of Us, recap and review, episode number 3. We'll be back next week, guys. Enjoy Sunday night watching the show. I'll be talking to you soon.